Hi guys, I have Maggie Sellers here. I'm so excited for this episode. I have Catherine and Sarah in the background, and they both said how excited they are to hear you. Maggie is the founder of Hot, Smart, Rich, and also the inventor of the dopamine menu, which is wild and such a cool thing that you did, and such an advocate for being smarter with your money and just sharing all of your positivity, life tips, relationship tips. So yeah, I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's very special to be able to do it in this environment too, where it feels like we're just gonna chat like friends.
I know, it's so cozy. I love it here. Thank you so much for joining.
Of course.
Firstly, let's get into how you started Hot, Smart, Rich. I think it is such a cool thing that you've done, so unique. No one else, I don't know of anyone else that's doing this type of content, and I think it's exactly what we need. So tell me how you got into all of it.
So it's kind of a long story, and it really just happened the most organically, which I think, having been an investor for a few years, is exactly what you want when you found a company. You don't want people to be like manufacturing things just to make money or to do something other than solve problems. And it's really a problem that I faced throughout my whole career and really my whole life, where by the way that I talk, by the way that I dress, by the way that I chose to spend my disposable income, there was always a connotation that it took away from what was in my brain or what I could put forth in the work world. And I always felt like I was either misunderstood or misconstrued, or I would get these backhanded compliments from bosses being like, oh, your voice makes you sound a lot more stupid than you actually are. And I totally misjudged you the first time I met you. I thought that you were going to be like such an airhead, and you're actually really insightful. And I feel like I leave you and I've learned something. And at this point in my career, I had spent about 10 years building different startups, all different sizes and scales, one of which went public, one of which was already a massive publicly traded company, and then all the way down to like the beginning phases and really being in the weeds of building a true, like from kind of 0 to 100 startup. And I just really felt this sense of like, I'm a female that really enjoys engaging in beauty and fashion and what I'm wearing and what workouts I do. But when I enter into my 9 to 5, call it, even though I was working like investment banking hours, I have to peel back all of that knowledge, which truly it is knowledge. Experience, being a consumer is knowledge, and just pretend to be somebody that I'm not. And it was just exhausting. And I had been working in different startups, mostly for men, and felt like I just couldn't win. And everything from, I remember kind of like the one big breaking point was there was a rumor going around one of the startups I worked at that I'd actually like engaged in a personal relationship with a boss of mine, which I can say on record, I have never had an intimate relationship with anybody that I've worked with, or especially in a position of power. And I remember like texting him and saying, if you've heard this, like you need to shut this down immediately. This could ruin my career. I have absolutely never engaged in anything like this. And his response was so laissez-faire and was like, he just didn't get how detrimental that could be to my career. And that was the moment where I was like, I've had enough. Like I honestly felt this breaking moment where I was just like, I want to be accepted for who I am, and I want to own the characteristics that I've often been told to choose between. And so I just started creating content that was about my career, all the insights that I've learned, and it just took on a life of its own. And once it started working, I was like, I need to separate Maggie Sellers from this, because Maggie Sellers is not sellable. Maggie Sellers is not a business, even though I would argue, yes, being a content creator is a business.
Yeah.
But if you want to sell your brand one day, like you can't really sell your name.
No.
And so I was like, I need to very quickly think of something. And like, what girl doesn't want to be hot, smart, and rich? Not saying that's all I want. I obviously want to be happy and healthy and all the things, but like I just knew that there was something here. And as soon as I started saying it, it kind of just took off like wildfire.
And did you know, like, how quickly did you realize you had to do that? Because that is quite a smart thing to do really early on, and it's something that people often overlook. And I think it's really important to say that if you do have a brand, like for example Pilates by Bryony, it would be more sellable if it was just called the Pilates method or something like that. So at what point did you realize, actually, I should do this for my future?
Yeah. I think it was honestly immediate, but like it was obviously a 10-year career of watching different brands get sold. Like Bobbi Brown having sold her name, like she now has a new brand, Jones Road, but it's like people still associate her with Bobbi Brown, even though she has nothing to do with that brand. So I'm always really hesitant to brand things after my name, because that is something that if you do want to sell it one day, it is super hard to tear yourself away from it.
To then do anything else.
Exactly. And it's actually something that I still don't feel like I have all the answers for. I was on the phone with a mentor of mine on Friday, so just this last weekend, and one of my biggest asks to her was, over the next, call it 2 to 5 years, I really want to be able to totally take myself away where it could fully run on its own without me. And it's like a movement and a brand, and it's like so much bigger than just me, which it is not possible to do today. And I've never done that before. I've watched people do it, but I've personally never done it. So that's like planting the seed with a mentor of mine that this is on my mind. It's something I want to be able to work towards, because I can't sit here and say I always have all the answers. But it was pretty immediate, because I knew I didn't personally want to be a celebrity or an influencer. I just wanted to create change, because I honestly just was suffering with my mental health pretty badly at that time. And that was really just the catalyst of like, this is not about me, this is about women. And if I'm going to be able to make a change, like it has to be bigger than me.
And when you were suffering with your mental health, would you say that was sparked by not fitting in the workplace, or not really finding your place, or people that appreciated you or valued you or understood you?
Yeah. I think I've actually struggled with my mental health pretty much my whole life. I have always been super bubbly and like very extroverted, and I love meeting people, but I've often found myself being very misunderstood. I think it got to a point where anybody inherently just wants to feel like they can be themselves and be seen and heard and understood. And I think it was like these backhanded compliments of like this passive aggressiveness, like
chipping away at you.
Yeah, it was like little, they say like 1,000 paper cuts, like cuts really deep. I don't know the saying. That's actually something I'm not good at, is repeating sayings.
Something like that.
Something like that, where it's like repeated people saying things like, oh, you're not as stupid as I thought you were going to be, or you're actually a lot nicer than I thought you were going to be, or oh, your voice makes you sound really stupid, but like you have a lot to say.
Yeah.
And to this day, like people still say that to me, and I'm like, I guess it's a compliment, but it kind of hurts, because I'm like, why did you think that? Just because of the way I present myself? Why am I not able to like post my passions, and that dictates like what's in my brain? I will never understand that, and I've never judged people that way, so I still find it really hard to understand.
And how, like, given the fact that you felt so like knocked and people just constantly going on and on and on, how did you find, like, what was the change? How did you find the confidence? Because it takes a lot of confidence, a lot of vulnerability to do what you're doing. And I think it obviously, as you said, it is for the bigger picture and it's to help people. But how did you actually pivot and find the confidence to put yourself out there?
I think it was two things. Like, one, it was this idea that like I am not for everybody. And as I was so afraid of like ruffling feathers, and I was also really afraid of like what the tech bros and the finance bros were going to think of me, because those are the people that like, especially in the day-to-day work that I do, being at a venture fund and obviously investing, like that's primarily who you surround yourself with. And like, I'll give you an example. Last week I was at a really empowering summit that's all about the future of mobility and transportation. There are people that are literally inventing like AI robots, and there are people that are doing like electric helicopters and airplanes that can deliver like safety equipment to people trapped in the Alps. Like, it is like amazing what people are doing. And I was reminded of like, honestly, how stupid I kind of felt when people were like, so what do you do? And I'm like, well, I have a media company called Hot Smart Rich. And people are like, sorry, what? I'm like inventing AI robots. And a few lessons from that. But one was like, I am not creating for you. Like, this is for the female who has every right to start a business. Like, just so everyone's aware, women are single-handedly keeping the U.S. economy afloat right now. We own 85, or we control 85% of consumer spend, but we get 2% of venture dollars. It has never been harder to build a business. It's also never been easier. And the common denominator I've learned spending so much time, especially in male-dominated spaces, is like, it is truly about just like speaking to an audience, like knowing who you are creating for. And it's not for the masses for me right now. It's for that very specific female founder that doesn't have the resources. And it's also about doing it as a community. And hate them or love them, the tech bro, like they have each other's back. And I was like, I need to do this for the females that, like, even if it's just an inspirational quote that they hear from Hot Smart Rich, which keeps them moving that day in their startup. That was also another unlock where it was like, it's really hard for me to create content versus I think other creators, because sometimes for me to do, like, if you saw my Aloe Yoga case study breakdown, that's like weeks of putting a financial model together, like going and searching public market information for Lululemon, for comps. Like it's
kind of, your content is kind of like the equivalent of preparing a pitch.
Literally.
Versus like sharing what makeup you're wearing. Yes. But I also love that you do both.
That's like the whole point.
That's why I love to follow you.
Yeah. And I think like for me, it got easier once I gave up the concept of trying to please everybody. Like the finance bro initially, when I was so afraid of even doing like makeup videos or shopping hauls, like they would have torn those down. And then I just am like, this is not for you.
No.
And
that, I think, is a really important message. When you're creating a product that you're trying to make fit or mold to the masses, you're actually creating a product that doesn't work for anyone.
100%.
Because you're spreading yourself so thin, you're creating this weak message that isn't actually adding value to anyone, and it's also probably exhausting. I mean, like, as a person, not everyone is going to like you. So just focus on the ones that do and provide value for those. Definitely.
I think that was like a huge thing last year. So last year I did a video and it was like, come with me. I'm a hot, smart, rich girl living in Beverly Hills in New York City. And in the content in the day, I had met with A16Z. I had met with a portfolio company. I had just invested into a deal that was led by Google, and I was also like shopping, eating Sweet Green on the road. I think I went into Sephora. I went out for drinks that night, and like, not that that's a very typical day, but those are days that I have and have had. And it went so viral on both Instagram and TikTok, and it got actually put onto VC Twitter. And this was the first time where like this account's called VCs Congratulate or Brag About Themselves. And the amount of hate comments that I got was like horrible to watch.
And but why could you hate that?
I think it's like, it goes back to like, no one's done what I've done before, and it's so uncomfortable. And like, if you really want to create change, you are not going to do it by not ruffling feathers.
I was just about to say you're ruffling feathers. Yeah. It's almost like a marker of you doing well, like in what you're specifically doing. If you are ruffling feathers, I think that's a good sign.
And there was one comment specifically that stuck with me that was like, I am doing something right. And I actually don't even know if I had formally, like, I knew I had started calling myself like a hot, smart, rich girl, but like everyone says like hot girls do this, but I hadn't like started a company that was like hot, smart, rich yet. There was one comment that was from a girl, and she was like, I actually was initially going to like post and comment about how disgusted I was with this video, and then I clicked your profile and went through your content and realized that like you actually are doing this for a bigger purpose, and you are so about female empowerment, and like I'm so thrilled I found you, like immediate follow.
Amazing.
And I was like,
that's probably your best like conversion ever, someone like that.
Ever.
And also what I think, it like, if people see hot, smart, rich girl Maggie Sellers, they probably instantly think, is she like talking about herself? This sounds very like self-fulfilling, but actually the thing that you do so well is it's really about everyone else. And I think you're so smart with your community. You're so giving to everyone else. So tell me about the community side of Hot, Smart, Rich and how that comes in, because I've seen you doing such nice events lately.
So I think like, you know, even back a year ago when I first was like, okay, I'm gonna start a company with it. Like, what do we need? Like, I always, when I'm thinking about business ideas, it's like start with the problem. And I've spent just peripherally through family members that are in AA. Like, I'm not personally in AA, but I know a lot about the program. And it is such an amazing community of just like resources for people, right? Whether it's like you need a one-to-one sponsorship, or you need like an actual 12-step guide, or you need meetings weekly, whatever it is. And so I really like studied that and was like, that's what female founders need. It's so isolating. You want a safe space that like you can go to and basically just, like we've said, feel heard and understood. So that was like the major problem I'm trying to solve.
I love that. That is such an amazing way to look at it. I think that's exactly what is needed.
Yes.
And it's so cool that you've taken it from that.
From AA. Yeah.
And it's that kind of like circle where you feel completely like you can say whatever is on your mind, not judged, welcomed, kind of comfortable. Yeah.
And like, I love so many of the other like female networks out there, and I like think they've done such an incredible job, but I do think it speaks very much to like one type of founder. And like, I am not a buttoned up person. Like, I will say things I think that other people would be like, what the fuck? Why is she saying that? And I wanted it to be a space where like you really could come and like you don't have to pretend. And so we tried different things initially where it was like we had a Slack channel and we had like 100 beta users at the beginning that would like, it was really sweet actually, like they would, you know, become friends at a meetup or whatever, and then they would end up working together, and then they would send pictures in the Slack message being like, oh my God, 2 hot, smart, rich girls, whatever. But it became really overwhelming for me because then people had like a direct one-to-one relationship where they're like asking me like, how should I what's the valuation of my startup, or what should I do in my pitch deck? And it was like, I'm trying to create change by creating it for a larger group of people. And as soon as it
than
like
the one-on-one.
Exactly. And so that was like, okay, this isn't really working. And then I also made a big distinction where I was like, I would rather work with brands that actually are paying technically me to create the content versus like the female founder who like is probably struggling to like put money into her business to be paying a membership fee. Now we offer where if you sign up for like our annual membership on our newsletter, you get like in-depth case studies that, like I say, take me and my MBA interns and my sister and my team like weeks to put together, so that you can pay for, but the majority of resources are totally free for the community, but it's being kind of sponsored by these brands.
Yeah.
And so recently it's been really exciting. We've done 2 kind of invite only, but like not the typical direct to consumer e-commerce founder I surround myself with, different events. One was like to find a passion outside of work, and one was really focused on building a community in Canada where I'm from, because when I was growing up in Canada there was like no community for cool brands, and we took them all to the Sabrina Carpenter concert. I think I only knew like one person before I walked into the box. And then next week for LA Tech Week, we're doing like an Ask Me Anything live with M13, and I'm going to interview a VC called Courtney Ream, and he's going to like open up his insights into basically like as a male VC, like what he's looking for. And the whole concept is like exposure therapy. So like it's super intimidating. We're going to bring you into a VC office so you can see what it's like, understand it's not so intimidating. I'm going to be able to like answer a ton of questions for the community that are scared, and then also have a male there who's like giving his perspective.
So just on the topic of working with your family, I also work with my family. I work with my dad and my mom. And you just said you worked with your sister. That's so cute. So tell me about your team setup.
Yeah.
And what was your like the kind of path to your team? What was your first hire and so on?
Okay.
It's the hardest thing, hiring.
It's like a very interesting time to ask, because we've tried a few different things out in terms of supporting me. And I think the hardest thing, and if someone is listening to this and feels like they can be this person, like I will hire you tomorrow, because like I said, my type of content is so different than normal content. And so not only do you have to have some level understanding of like the business side to be able to help with things like research or even editing, like what is really important to be keeping in versus taking out. Like I've found a huge struggle with anything that touches the content side. So that's actually been basically between my sister and I. So we started working together about a year ago when we like formalized HSR. She has a totally different background than me. She was a CPA. She was actually the head of finance at Missouri for the 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she is like my yin to my yang. We have done so many businesses together our whole life. Like she and I have done calligraphy businesses, gift wrapping businesses.
No way.
We had a blog together. And funny story, our first brand deal from our blog back in the day called Pepper and Piper was with Missouri. And then she came on and she went on to literally become their like head of finance for 5 years.
Oh my God.
And she was on mat leave and my business was like starting to really grow. At the time I had an MBA intern working for me. I had an assistant that was supposed to kind of do like creative production and also just like personal assisting.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a thought partner that was doing like the other operational side of the business. And I think being successful is knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. And it's funny being an investor because people think I'm like amazing at finance, which like I hate to tell you, like I'm not the best person at finance. Like I understand it and I went to business school and I can read a model, but like I am never going to be an FP&A. I can't build you a model like that my sister could. And so I knew I needed to bring in somebody that I could fill my weaknesses. And I don't enjoy that. I'm a good investor because I understand consumer behavior better than I think honestly most people I've talked to, maybe minus my boyfriend. He's like probably the best at it. And so it's worked out really well because we kind of worked through all the kinks of working together before this business.
Yeah.
Roles and responsibilities, tone of voice.
You've realized the strengths and whose weaknesses and you're covering all angles and everything.
Yes. And then we always have MBA interns that work for us because these are people that have typically spent like 5 to 7 years in a corporate environment. They really understand how to help me on like research and like even just different ways to build case studies. So like these are the people that don't necessarily have the marketing skills that I need for like creative production, but they have like amazing brains in terms of like research and development of the content we're going to produce. And then they also lean in on the investment side that we're doing. So if we're going to like raise a syndicate or invest even my own personal money or do follow-on investments or send investor updates of all the portfolio companies that we've already invested into, they're really like the back end day to day that my sister actually now oversees. So technically as we build out the organization, we're currently hiring for like 3 roles. Pretty much everybody will roll up to my sister because her title is like, you know, co-founder, president, COO, and I'm more like visionary CEO. I never want to be called talent. Like that's not at all the goal of this, but I do need to spend a lot of my time meeting people, investing, being in the consumer landscape, like really just like finding ways to create content or to be investing versus like running the actual business.
And as well, because you're not necessarily wanting to be the face Maggie Sellers of Hot, Smart, Rich, but you as the founder are. So I think that's quite a nice thing to do and a good thing. Like other brands that do it really well are like Refi, for example.
Yeah.
Refi obviously use loads of different models and you know that it's Jess is involved in it, but then Jess as a founder or co-founder is like on the side doing her co-founder stuff and really pushing it. So I think you can kind of be linked as the founder without being the brand, if you know what I mean.
For sure. And I think you set the vision and then it's like up to the team. And that's a huge lesson I have is like, I can't do everything. And so for example, when I first wanted to do the first like HSR case study, that was actually because I found I love reading HBR case studies, which is like Harvard Business Review. And I was like, why are there no like relevant case studies? They take like 4 to 5 years to come out at HBR. Like, why can't we bring something to market a lot faster? That's like from a brand that we all aspire to be today. Like, how much would you love to read like a road case study today, right?
Yeah, so good.
And so
you need to bring one out.
That's what we're like basically now working on, where it's like my vision, my idea, like what's the lesson we want this to be from. I then go and my network is really what I go to for like, okay, we need this expert to come in and give this quote. We need this person to come in and be able to write this anchor part of the case study. The MBA interns are then actually the ones like creating the content that's in the actual case study. So even though it's from my brain, my sister's overseeing all of it.
Yeah.
She's like the executive producer. And then we're now building out a team of the people that are basically doing the day to day.
And speaking of network, like you now have an incredible network of people that really support you and mentors around you. How do you start a network? How do you build your network? Everyone says your net worth is your your network is your net worth.
Yeah.
Is that the right way around?
Your network is your net worth. Yeah.
So how would you do that without having any network to begin with? What's the starting point?
Yeah. So I had zero network when I moved to LA almost 7 years ago. I knew one person, and I remember saying yes to everything. I think there's seasons of your life where you say yes, and then there's seasons where you have to say no. And right now, my boyfriend says he's in like a I'm not making new friends season. I'm in a no season where like pretty much if you ask me to do something, like just assume the answer is no, but like if I can make it work, it will be yes. But when I first moved here, it was a season of yes. And I think it is like what everyone says, it is like so uncomfortable to put yourself into a room where you're walking in, you don't know anybody.
Oh my God, so intimidating.
It's so intimidating. I even felt that last week at that summit I was talking about. Like I was so intimidated. And I like the one thing I wanted to do was like grab my phone and walk into a room and just like be on it because I felt so weird.
Yeah.
You're like that little kid in grade 4, that was the year I was bullied, so that's like what I remember, like in the cafeteria being like, do I have anybody to sit with?
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes you won't, and that's okay. But if you don't put yourself in those situations, you're never going to grow your network.
It's so true. And actually, one thing, I've said this before, but if you walk into a room on your phone, people receive that as you are busy, you're not engaged, you're not wanting to meet anyone, you're not wanting to mingle. So if you're going there to network and to meet people, you need to walk in the room, like really challenge yourself, put your phone away, put your phone in your bag, walk in, like shoulders down, good posture, make eye contact, and literally just go and say hello to the first person you see.
Yeah.
And like
100%.
go and like be confident.
And honestly, like
because it has like a snowball effect, don't you think? When you
For sure.
have that one person, then the next person, and you're like, okay, I can do this, I'm doing it, and you're, you know, it just has a good effect.
Yeah, and then it's also like even after that event, like be the first person to follow up, like send a thank you note. Like these are the little things that will never go out of style because they truly do make the make or break of your career or of your network. And I
even
think
friendships.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when we first met, you did that with me. You were like, it was so nice to meet you, and I could have sat and you had like a really sweet message that followed up, and it's a nice way to leave people even in a friendship setting. So I think it's a good point in a business.
It's so funny you say that because actually like one of my friends asked to go for hangout. She was kind of in like a down spot in her life, and I spent, you know, like 2 hours with her, and we had a really engaging, like meaningful conversation. And she didn't follow up with me after like all weekend. And actually I thought about it and I was like, that is hurtful because I just, and
you probably put so much time into it, and then you're like, oh,
it just left. Like usually if somebody, here's the thing, and this is really maybe morbid, but I never want the people that I care about to guess how I feel about them. And it's actually funny, like to be super vulnerable, like with my current boyfriend, when we first started dating, he was always like, wow, you're really vocal about how you feel about me. And like, I'm not used to this. And it's like, I at first thought, I was like, maybe it's a lot, but I would rather him know how I feel than be left questioning or guessing. And I think that's true with every relationship. Like if somebody's made an impact on your life, say something.
Tell them. Or even if you're in a restaurant and the food is incredible, the service is incredible, tell them, because we can often complain but not actually say the positive things.
Well, and it's funny because even on TikTok, right? Like I have certain series, and when it doesn't get that much engagement, I won't do it anymore because I'm like, people obviously don't like it. And that's okay. Like I love to create content, so I'll reinvent. And then after a while, I remember it's like my HSR podcast playlist, which I like curate podcasts for people of like to make you hot, smart, rich. And then I did one after like a month off, and I got so many comments back like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm so happy this is back. I was waiting for this. And I made another video and I was like, guys, if you don't tell people how and what you feel, it's gonna go away.
Especially for you, like you're testing these things with your audience. If they're not telling you, you're like, okay, that didn't work, that didn't land.
Or like if you look at the data on your app, I'm sure if like nobody's doing arm workouts, you're like, why would you go and develop 20 more arm workouts?
Or do an arm challenge.
Exactly. It's like you're gonna do what's working.
Yeah.
And
completely.
maybe you test things here and there, but then this is the number one investing principle is follow the money. So like, where are people spending money? So like something that's not really in my investment thesis, but I find super fascinating. And I'll actually give you an example of a startup that I found that I think is really cool. Housing. People are spending so much of their money, I might get this wrong, it maybe is 33% of their income on their house or on their housing.
Yeah.
So follow the money. Like, why are there startups that are, or like what startups are being built that equates to alleviating the pressure of housing, like rent costs, things like that. There was a really cool startup I found when I followed the money that was around actually like cohabitating single moms. So their whole thesis is like, it's really hard to be a single mom. It's really expensive and it's super isolating. And also like, think about if you want to go on a date or you want to go with your friends and you don't have a partner there to like take care of your kids. But now imagine 2 families live there and you have another mom that's living with you with their kids. And like, if you need a day off to go on a date or to go for a girls' night, you now have somebody that can watch your kids. So it's alleviating like the cost of how much it.
I love that.
How cool is that?
What's the company called?
I honestly can't remember. I'll have to look it up and send it to you and you can put it in the show notes. But it actually started as a non-for-profit and now it's turning into a for-profit business. But it's things like that where it's like if you follow the money of where things are going, it often will reveal the answer because
and it will give you clues. Yeah. Along the way.
Yeah.
Just to completely pivot because I want to cover everything with you. This is the problem with you. The good thing and the problem, there's so many things to cover. So to talk about relationships because I love the content you share on relationships and also fun fact for everyone. This is my favorite story. I met your boyfriend at a dinner with can I say with who?
Yeah, you can say with who.
With Lauren and Michael Bostic. And he was so, so sweet. And Lauren was asking me, who should we set him up with? And I didn't know you at the time.
No,
I'm like hesitating because I'm like wondering what I can share. We followed each other, but I had never met you. And I was like, what about that finance girl, Maggie Sellers? Anyway, it turns out that you were literally like in the beginning stages. Like, how many dates had you been on? 2 or something?
I think we'd been on like 3 or 4, and that was the first time that he went away and he brought me back a postcard. And now our thing with each other is we always give each other a postcard, like no matter where we go.
Sweet. So yeah, I completely called it, not even knowing you, like not knowing actually anyone that knows you. Like we didn't, I didn't. So strange, so meant to be, and you're just so loved up. But how do you so I know that you talk a lot and talk really openly about your breakup.
Yeah.
So you were engaged, you broke up, and it obviously was the best thing that ever happened to you.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to do a complete like solo episode on this because I feel like we have so much in common on this topic. But can you just talk to me about how the end of a relationship can actually be like a complete redirection of your life in the best way?
I could literally do an episode about this, and I think this is
there's a part 2 coming.
Yeah, like this is exactly why I didn't, I love that you knew of me, but like to be known as just the finance girl is like so hard because this really was the catalyst to like a complete change in my life. It was like breaking up with an old version, not only of myself, but of like my entire life. Like I always say, I lit my life on fire and it was really hard. I had literally nowhere to live. Like your number one Maslow hierarchy of need is like safety and security and like where you are going to live. And I didn't have any of that. And I just felt like a total failure. I was 30. So like they say your 30s, you have your shit together. Life is good. Like your 20s were for fucking up. And I was like, wait, I'm about to blow my life up and I just turned 30. Like what the hell?
Yeah.
But I was miserable in that relationship and I knew it then. But looking back, I actually am like, I try not to have regret, but I'm just like, oh my God, because it was like as long as it was, I just feel like it was wasted time. And as soon as I got over the idea that like I was going to rebirth a new version of myself, my dream life has come together. But it wasn't overnight. And I think a huge thing that I did that was very different, and I would recommend anybody do this if you're going through a breakup, is do not give in to your ego. And what I mean by that is it is soul crushing. It is embarrassing. It is so easy to like pass things off and be like, whatever, I was better, blah, 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 blah. What I did was like, I really turned inward. I moved about 45 minutes away from where I live now. I went back to my hobbies. I rented or I leased a horse. I made it very difficult to see people, like, because I live so far away. And I basically said no to everything and like spent the time falling back in love with myself. And as somebody with anxiety, I can tell you, like, loving myself authentically by myself is the reason I'm in such a healthy relationship today, and is the reason why, like, no matter what I face, I know that, like, I have value and I have worth and I will be able to get through anything.
Yeah.
But I didn't go on dating apps. People were trying to set me up the entire time. Really funny story about my boyfriend is, like, actually people tried to set me up with him from the basically August of last year, which is when I called off my engagement.
Isn't that weird? Because it's almost like you weren't ready.
I wasn't.
So it was like the universe was just blocking you from meeting him then, because actually you weren't ready.
And I was saying no to everybody.
Everything happens in the right time.
Exactly.
And look at you now.
And it's like, it just takes a belief in yourself, and like truly focusing on yourself is the only thing that will get you to where you want to go, versus like the dopamine of a like on Instagram or a DM or a Raya message or a Hinge message. Like, those things are so fleeting, and they don't actually create a foundation for you to find somebody that you genuinely love.
I completely agree. And I think the most important thing is, when you meet someone, you need to have your self-worth. You really need to, if you're on your own right now and you're thinking about getting into a relationship or meeting someone soon, the best thing you can invest in is, like you say, self-love and loving yourself. But really it's about your worth.
Yeah.
How much do you value yourself? How much do you value your feelings, you know, your needs, your opinions, whatever it is, and really knowing who you are. If you get into a relationship and you don't know yourself, you don't value yourself, you're not a whole person. So then you get into this new relationship and they're able to sway you in different ways or take you down a path that before you know it, you're like, how the hell am I here? And I've just given up on all my beliefs and my values and everything. So I think I have so much in common with you on this topic, and it's just such an important thing, I think, to really put out there. And I think it's so nice that you share about the relationship.
And I also think this too, like, my old relationship, and listen, like, I think that there are different circumstances for everybody, but I moved way too fast in my last relationship. And I now, like, with my current boyfriend, like, I love that, like, things are slow, because you know what I always tell myself? I'm like, this is probably going to be the last year that, like, I get to be selfish. And like, if I need a girls' night and I want to, like, sleep at my apartment because I have my own place, like, I can do that. And like, it is so easy to start fantasizing about, like, the future and, like, what it will be like, but then you often forget all the things you have to give up when you're in when you're living with somebody, you're married, you're pregnant, all these things.
And there is no rush. You have so much time for all of that stuff. And also the girl time, like, you don't have that in the same way, like, 20
when you live
years.
With somebody.
Yeah, you don't. You really don't. No. And having your, like, I live with my boyfriend now, but we lived together for so long, and I kept my apartment for so long, even when we lived together. And it was, like, obviously such a luxury, but I felt like I was Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City, where I could, like, go home and do my, like, everything shower and do all my things and then come back and be like, hi.
Literally.
I just woke up like this.
But I think that's, like, one of the things that people are so afraid to say is, like, the unconventional. I remember when you told me that when we were in London, and I was like, that is so something that I would do. But, like, it kind of is brave to even say that, because so many people are like, oh, well, that's not normal. Or that's
maybe he's keeping his options open. It's like, no, I'm keeping my options open. Not in that sense, but in the sense that I have my place, you know, like, even just small things. If I wanted to have my mom over for, like, the coziest girls' night ever, and, you know, I don't want to, like, kick him out or whatever and say, can you go out? Then I have my place there. It was that piece of independence. And I was really aware that once I gave that up, that was, like, my life, my new life. So it was just so exciting to have it for as long as possible. So I would say, don't rush things.
No. And honestly, this is another, like, I think so much of my success in business has come from, like, the failures. I've had a lot of failures in business too, but I've had a lot of failures in my personal life. And it's like, every relationship, whether you like it or not, your sister, your boyfriend, your best friend, your mom, it is about leverage. leverage is the key word, where like if you don't have leverage in a relationship, there's nothing of value that you can offer things. Like human nature is you give something, you get something. And whether you like it or not, let's say you're an amazing friend, you call me 20 times a week, I never pick up the phone and call you or text you. Okay, maybe I'm going through something, but like after a few months of doing that, you're going to stop calling because you're not getting something back from me. And so I think with relationships, it's like as soon as you rush forward and you don't think things through, you kind of lose a lot of the leverage that like you have. Where like, let's say something is a make or break for you and you live together. If you don't have your own space to go to and be like, well, that would have to change for me to do X, Y, and Z, then like you don't have leverage because you live there already.
It's about having options as well.
Yes.
And that's the thing about rushing into relationships. You really don't know someone until you properly live with them, you've been with them for a while, and then you realize if you can fit together and you're a good match. Until then, you need to keep your freedom and your independence for as long as possible. And it's not to say that you can't reverse anything, but I just think it's good to like, it's a good message to be like, no, like, you know, you're lucky I'm here.
100%.
I have so many options.
Know your worth.
Yeah, and I have my own place, and you know, having that independence, I think it just like sets the tone of a really like even playing field.
100%.
It's powerful.
It is. And I think that's like, you know, it's so interesting to think about because you and I are both such like feminine energies of like nurturing and like loving, but there is obviously a side of me that is also extremely competitive and masculine and like very much like a go-getter. And I think like part of being so independent and driven is like it's put me in this position. But also my boyfriend now is like truly the first person that like I am so feminine around and like enjoy being in that state with. But it's taken me to date a lot of people to know that it's going to be a very specific person that can do that for me.
Yeah.
And it is difficult at times, especially when I think when you live together, to be able to turn that side of your brain off when like during the workday, I'm a totally different version of myself than I am on the weekends or at night.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, I think my biggest thing in life, and if someone takes one thing away from this podcast, don't get set up to fail in any aspect of your life. If you can't meet a deadline for your job, speak up before you start it. Don't be a hero in anything that you do. My biggest thing I've done my whole career is I will never get set up to fail. And that's not to say I haven't failed. I've failed a lot. But I think what I mean by that is like it's taking the learnings and the lessons, whether it's from this podcast, people you surround yourself with, or your own, and being like, I won't do that again. And I have more data that's an input so that the output will be very different.
Yeah.
And so for me now in this relationship, it's like, what are all of the things that I know that I am going to do differently to not get set up to fail? Because that is, I think, the difference between making the same mistakes and then having a different outcome.
Yeah, you're right. And it's the same thing when you look at like wellness things and workouts. You need to set yourself up for success as much as possible. Then the consistency comes, then the confidence comes, and it all kind of like has a knock-on effect. So I just have a few more minutes with you, and I want to just get onto some wellness stuff because I saw you post I love the lists that you do on your TikTok. It's so good. And one of them was saying that you've given up high intensity workouts.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
So it's funny because my mom was actually a trained Pilates instructor.
Yes.
We have a reformer at our cottage. And I remember when she first, so I was an athlete growing up. I played really competitive volleyball. And I remember when she first started doing it, I like honestly kind of like regretfully like made fun of her a little bit and was like, how is this a workout? Like I was used to training where you're like, even back in the day we were doing like ice baths and like we were in a grind of like you're playing 3-4 hours a day and training.
Almost like kind of punishing yourself, like going for it. Yeah.
Punishment. And then when I turned like 25, 26, I mean, just a lot has happened in my life over those few years, but I started getting insanely bad hormonal acne and I was like gaining weight and I was just like so a different version of myself than I had been used to. And I was doing these really high intensity training classes at Barry's. I was doing like a personal trainer. I was going on these like mile-long runs and I was like not losing weight. I was getting acne and I was just like miserable with my mental health.
Yeah.
And my mom was like, I think you need to slow down. Like, I think you need to give yourself a break. And why don't you try Pilates? And I was like, I honestly still was like, I don't think that works. And I remember I started like walking and doing Pilates, both mat and reformer. And before I had found you, it was like really expensive because I was doing it at a studio. And even just the switch of like signing up for you and doing it at home and eliminating the like 15 minutes there, 15 minutes back, the like clean up your mat, like all of it, that level of slowness has just made such an impact to me and like in my life where I'm in like the healthiest, happiest, hottest, smartest, richest version of myself. And it was breaking up with a lot of the ideas of like what I had been told would work. And not that I actually have lifted heavy weights twice in the last week because my boyfriend has a gym. And so like I'll go there and do it with him. But like it's not the same level of priority I put on my health and wellness that I used to. Yeah. And I'm also very big into like cycle tracking. And so when it's that time of the month, it's like I'm not doing cold plunges. Like no. I'm not doing runs. Like I'm happy to do that stuff when I'm in like a different phase of my cycle. But I'm very attuned to like what feels good for my body. And it's honestly just slowing down and doing movement to move and not to like honestly hurt myself.
Yeah. And also more the mental side of things. If you're like coming at it from that angle, not so much thinking about the aesthetic. Yeah. Somehow it just all works, comes together.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to like it's speaking nicely to yourself.
So speaking of wellness, I want to do just to end, I want to do a quick fire question on all things full spectrum wellness. So whether it's finance, wellness, health, career, business, relationships, whatever. Okay, so what's your number one relationship tip?
Number one relationship tip.
Or mantra.
Okay, I think there's a few, but let me see if I can get this right in my head. What do I always say? A lot of people are like, does he like me? Does he like me? Then a lot of other people started saying like, do you like him? Do you like him? My number one thing I've always said is, do I like myself when I'm with him?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. That's good. That's a good one. Okay, number one business tip. Follow the money, as you just said.
Follow the money is a good one. I think the number one business tip that I have would be more EQ. I would say that's more like a investment principle. The EQ business tip I would have is people will never remember what you do. They will remember how you made them feel. And people do business with people that they like.
Yes, that's a really good one. And what are your 3 wellness non-negotiables?
I have to walk 10,000 steps a day, and especially 10 minutes after I eat because I have so many digestive problems. I also think that being simple is better. Like it doesn't have to be complicated, and you can make so many excuses, but like you're busy, work out for 10 minutes. Like you don't have weights, use water bottles. Like just make it simple. And then the third one would be do what works for you. Like
love that.
Don't listen to everybody else. Just do what makes you feel good, and when you feel good, you'll just look good.
Love that. And book that's changed your life. I think I know what you're going to say.
Which one?
Think Again.
Love Think Again. But I would say like changed my life. I would honestly say Play Nice But Win by Michael Dell.
Ooh, I've never heard that one.
Yeah, I love it.
That's a good one.
Like it speaks to family dynamics, startup dynamics, like hostile takeovers, corporate cultures, like everything.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, and in one sentence, what will Hot, Smart, Rich be doing in 5 years?
I think my definition of success with Hot, Smart, Rich is that we still control 85% of consumer spend as women, but we get way more than 2% of venture dollars.
Okay, I love that. What a good way to end. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me on. This was like one of my favorite conversations.
Was it?
Yeah, it was really good.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.